Scene hospital waiting room afternoon int. City General Hospital waiting room. Afternoon, the clock on the reception desk reads 3 p.m. Eleanor, 72, enters the gleaming, sterile lobby, her worn slippers a stark contrast to the polished marble floor. Her hands tremble slightly, not from fear but from the weariness of a life carried on stooped shoulders, etched by time and pain. Her silver hair is pulled back in a simple bun, her eyes holding the quiet serenity of someone who has learned to find peace amidst the storm. She clutches a yellowed envelope to her chest, its corners softened by repeated handling. Inside are medical reports she can't fully decipher, but knows are important enough to justify the 3-hour bus ride from the city's outskirts. Her fingers, gnarled from decades of domestic work, hold the papers like a fragile treasure that might crumble at any moment. The line at the reception desk snakes lazily, filled with people seeking answers to aches that patience alone can't soothe. Eleanor takes her place at the end, adjusts her worn handbag and waits. This isn't her first rodeo, and it won't be her last. Gradually she becomes aware of the glances, some compassionate, others indifferent, many simply too weary to notice her presence. Ahead of her, a young woman loudly discusses work problems on her phone, gesturing impatiently as the line inchingly progresses. Behind her, a middle-aged man checks his watch every minute, audibly sighing whenever the movement stalls. Eleanor, however, remains quiet, observing the world around her with the patience of someone who knows that haste rarely solves life's deepest problems. By the time it's her turn, it's almost 4 p.m. The receptionist, a young woman no older than 25, doesn't look up from her computer screen as Eleanor approaches the counter. Her fingers fly across the keyboard with the mechanical efficiency of someone who performs these actions hundreds of times a day. Next, she says, without raising her head. Eleanor approaches slowly, places the envelope on the counter, and in a soft but firm voice explains that she needs to reschedule an appointment she missed last week due to a fall that confined her to her home. As she speaks, the receptionist continues typing, her eyes glued to the screen, as if Eleanor's words are mere background noise to be processed and filed away. ID, the young woman says, extending her hand without looking up. Eleanor opens her faded leather purse and retrieves her driver's license, placing it carefully on the counter. The receptionist takes it with abrupt movements, types in the numbers, and returns it with the same disinterest. No appointments available this month. Next available is December. The words fall like stones into a silent pond. December. It's only September. 3 months to wait for an appointment that could determine the course of treatment she can't afford to delay. Eleanor feels the weight of those words, but her expression remains serene. She has learned, over the years, that dignity isn't measured by how quickly we get what we need, but by how we handle the obstacles we encounter along the way. Is there any possibility of a sooner appointment? She asks calmly. My test showed something the doctor said was urgent. The receptionist finally looks up, but only to give a look of impatience that makes it clear this conversation has already overstayed its welcome. Ma'am, I already explained. No openings. If it's urgent, go to the emergency room. Next, the word next echoes through the lobby like a gavel, final and irrevocable. Eleanor feels a blush rise to her cheeks, not from shame, but from the deep sadness of being treated as if her life and her pain are insignificant. Even so, she doesn't move immediately. She stands there for a few seconds, looking at the young woman who has already returned her attention to the computer screen, as if Eleanor has simply vanished. Then she notices the glances around her. Some people in line seem uncomfortable with the situation, but no one speaks up. A man in a suit, waiting in a nearby chair, observes the scene with a thoughtful expression. A nurse passing in the hallway slows her pace, clearly overhearing the conversation, but continues walking without intervening. The world keeps turning, indifferent to this small moment of institutional cruelty unfolding in broad daylight. Eleanor gathers her documents with the same calm with which she presented them. Her movements are slow, but not for dramatic effect. It's simply how her body moves when carrying so much emotional weight. She takes a few steps toward the waiting room chairs, not because she has any specific plan, but because she needs a moment to process what has just happened. She sits in a blue plastic chair, the kind that populate waiting rooms across the country, and opens the yellowed envelope again. Her eyes scan the medical numbers and symbols she doesn't fully understand, but knows represent something significant happening in her body. She had felt the urgency in the voice of the doctor at the clinic when he referred her to this specialist. She had seen the worry in his eyes when he explained that some tests needed closer monitoring. At this point, it's important to pause and reflect on stories like this one that we share daily on our channel. If you've been following our narratives and feeling the same emotional impact they have on us during production, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. We do this not only to reach more people, but because we deeply believe that stories have the power to transform us and remind us of the humanity we sometimes forget to practice in our daily lives. Each new subscriber shows us that there's one more person willing to take a few minutes to reflect on empathy, dignity, and the importance of seeing each other with more compassion. And frankly, in times like these, we need every possible reminder that small gestures can change not only a day, but a whole life. Your subscription helps us continue creating these stories, and who knows, they might reach someone who needs to be reminded of their own humanity at just the right moment. Eleanor remained seated, lost in thought, when a shadow fell over her. She looked up and saw a man of about 60, wearing an impeccable white coat, with an ID badge hanging around his neck. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his blue eyes conveyed a kindness that starkly contrasted with the coldness she had encountered at the reception desk. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside hers. Eleanor nodded, and he sat down with the same deliberate calm with which she herself moved. For a few moments, they sat in silence, observing the constant movement of the hospital, patients being called, family members waiting for news, staff going about their daily routines. "I'm Dr. Miller," he said finally, turning to her with a kind smile. "I've worked here for over 30 years, and I couldn't help but notice what happened at the counter." Eleanor looked at him in surprise. She wasn't used to receiving attention from doctors, especially not in situations like this. Usually when doctors spoke to her, it was to give quick instructions or explain diagnoses in terms she could barely understand. "Doctor, I don't want to cause any trouble for anyone," she said softly. "I know you have a lot of people to see, and I can wait until December if necessary." Dr. Miller shook his head gently. "Ma'am, may I see your test results?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment, but something in his tone of voice reassured her. She opened the envelope and handed him the papers, watching as he examined them with professional attention. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, and she could see that he was identifying something important in those numbers and symbols. "What's your name?" he asked, still looking at the tests. Eleanor Silva." He smiled upon hearing the name. "Eleanor Silva. A beautiful, strong name. Reminds me of my grandmother." He folded the tests carefully and returned them to her. "Eleanor, these tests really need close follow-up. This isn't something you can wait 3 months for." Her heart quickened, not because she was afraid of the diagnosis. At 72, she had already faced enough loss and pain to understand that life is a temporary gift that should be lived with dignity, regardless of how much time we have left. But because someone had finally validated her concern, had recognized that her situation was important enough to deserve attention, Dr. Miller rose from the chair with the same calm with which he had sat down. "Come with me, Eleanor. Let's take care of this." They walked back to the reception desk together, where the same young woman continued her mechanical routine of attending to patients with efficient, dehumanized competence. When she saw Dr. Miller approaching, her posture changed immediately. She straightened in her chair, stopped typing, and looked at him with an attention she hadn't given to any of the patients she had seen up to that moment. "Good afternoon, Dr. Miller," she said with a smile that hadn't been present minutes before. "Good afternoon, Julia," he replied, reading her name tag. This is Eleanor. She needs an urgent cardiology appointment. Her tests show changes that can't wait until December. Julia looked at Eleanor, and this time her eyes really saw her, not as a number in line or a problem to be quickly solved, but as a person whose health and well-being depended on the service she was there to provide. Of course, doctor. Let me see if we have any sooner openings. Her fingers flew back over the keyboard, but this time with a different purpose. She wasn't just processing information, she was looking for a solution. Eleanor watched the computer screen, but her attention was really focused on Dr. Miller, who remained at her side like a silent guardian of her dignity. I found an opening for tomorrow at 2 p.m., Julia said, in a completely different tone of voice than she had used before. It's with Dr. Santos. He's excellent. May I schedule it for you? Eleanor felt her eyes well up with tears, but she managed to control them before they fell. Yes, please. Thank you very much. As Julia prepared the scheduling papers, Dr. Miller leaned slightly toward Eleanor. Eleanor, when you arrive for your appointment, ask at reception for Dr. Santos. If there's any problem, any difficulty, ask them to call me. My office is on the 4th floor. She nodded, still processing the unexpected kindness she had found in this place, where she had arrived feeling invisible. Julia finished preparing the documents and handed them to her with a genuine smile. Eleanor, I'm sorry for the previous confusion. Sometimes I get so focused on procedures that I forget the people behind them. Eleanor looked at the young woman and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Exhaustion, pressure, the weight of a job that demanded efficiency at the expense of humanity. She understood that Julia wasn't a bad person, just someone who had gotten lost in the dehumanizing routine of a system that prioritized numbers over stories, speed over compassion. Don't worry, dear, Eleanor said softly. We all have tough days. Dr. Miller smiled upon hearing that response. There was something profoundly touching in the way Eleanor managed to keep her humanity intact even after being treated with disregard. It was as if she possessed an inexhaustible wellspring of understanding and forgiveness that the modern world seemed to have forgotten how to access. They walked together to the hospital exit, and Dr. Miller accompanied her to the bus stop. Along the way, he told her about his grandmother, who had raised him and his siblings after they lost their parents in an accident. Eleanor listened attentively, realizing that this man had learned about compassion not from medical textbooks, but from living with someone who, like her, had faced life with quiet dignity. Doctor, she said when they reached the bus stop, you didn't have to do this. I'm just another patient. He shook his head firmly. Eleanor, you are just nothing of the sort. You are a person who deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of your social or economic status. And more than that, you reminded me why I chose to be a doctor. The bus arrived a few minutes later, a blue and white vehicle that had seen better days, but still fulfilled its function of connecting people to their destinations. Eleanor boarded slowly, thanked Dr. Miller once more, and found a seat near the window. As the bus pulled away, she waved to him, and he remained at the stop until the vehicle disappeared around the bend of the avenue. During the entire trip back home, Eleanor looked out the window thinking about what had happened. It wasn't just the fact that she had secured the appointment that touched her deeply, but the way Dr. Miller had seen her as a person. In a world that frequently reduces the elderly to numbers in statistics or problems to be managed, he had chosen to see her as a complete human being, with a history, dignity, and rights. When she arrived home, a small 2-room house on the city's outskirts, Eleanor made some tea and sat in her favorite chair, a floral armchair she had received as a gift from one of the families she had worked for as a housekeeper for over 20 years. The house was simple, but clean and organized, with family photographs scattered on the shelves and plants carefully arranged near the windows. She picked up the old telephone that sat on a wooden table and called her daughter, who lived in another city. She told her about the day, about the scheduled appointment, about the unexpected kindness she had encountered at the hospital. Her daughter was relieved to know that the appointment had been resolved, but Eleanor knew that what really mattered wasn't just the appointment, but what that experience had meant to her. That night, before going to sleep, Eleanor knelt beside her bed, as she had done every night since childhood, and said her prayers. But this time, along with the usual thanksgivings and requests for her children and grandchildren, she included a special gratitude for having met someone who had chosen to make a difference, not with grand gestures or grandiose speeches, but simply by treating her as the dignified human being she had always known herself to be. The next morning, Eleanor woke up feeling different. It wasn't exactly hope. She had learned not to place excessive expectations on situations beyond her control. It was more of a kind of peace, the feeling that regardless of what the tests revealed, or what the future brought, she had been seen, heard, and treated with dignity. She got ready with the same care as always, choosing her best clothes for the appointment, not because she thought it would make a difference in the medical care, but because dressing well was a way of maintaining her self-esteem and showing respect for herself and others. The appointment with Dr. Santos went better than she had expected. He was attentive, explained the tests in terms she could understand, and developed a treatment plan that was both effective and accessible to her financial reality. When she mentioned Dr. Miller, Dr. Santos' eyes lit up. "Ah, Doctor. 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 Dr. Miller. He's a role model for all of us here at the hospital. He goes above and beyond his duties, always caring for patients as whole people, not just their illnesses." After the appointment, Eleanor made sure to go up to the 4th floor to thank Dr. Miller personally. She found him in his office, attending to a young child who had broken his arm. Even busy, he stopped what he was doing when he saw her at the door, and greeted her with the same kind smile as the day before. "How was the appointment, Eleanor?" "It was very good, Doctor." Dr. Santos explained everything clearly, and will start treatment next week. She paused, searching for the right words. "I just wanted to thank you, not just for the appointment, but for seeing me. Sometimes we become invisible, you know, and you reminded me that I'm still here." Dr. Miller stood up from his chair and approached her. "Eleanor, I want you to know that you also taught me something yesterday. You reminded me that our profession isn't just about diagnosing and treating illnesses, but about caring for people, and that every person who comes through here has an important story." They talked for a few more minutes, and when Eleanor said goodbye, she knew she was taking away more than just a scheduled medical appointment. She carried the certainty that there are still people willing to make a difference, even when it would be easier to simply follow the rules and maintain professional distance. Months later, Eleanor's treatment progressed well. Her condition stabilized, and she continued to live her life with the same quiet dignity as always. But something had changed in her, a renewed trust in human kindness, a constant reminder that small gestures can transform not only a difficult day, but a person's perspective on the world. Dr. Miller, in turn, never forgot that encounter. He began to pay more attention to patients who seemed lost or helpless in the hospital, especially the elderly who arrived alone and scared. He instituted a simple practice in his routine. Whenever possible, he dedicated a few extra minutes to talk to patients, to see them as whole people, instead of just medical cases. Eleanor and Dr. Miller's story spread discreetly throughout the hospital, not as a legend or an official example of good practice, but as a whispered reminder among the staff that their profession had a human component that no protocol or system could replace. Julia, the receptionist, started making eye contact with patients and smiling more frequently. Other people working at the hospital began to notice small moments where they could make a difference in someone's experience. The truth is that most acts of kindness are not recorded anywhere. They don't appear in the news, don't win public recognition, aren't remembered in speeches or ceremonies, but these gestures exist, happen every day, in hospitals, schools, buses, bank lines, supermarkets, everywhere people meet and have the opportunity to choose between indifference and compassion. Eleanor Silva's story reminds us that human dignity is not a privilege that some deserve more than others. It is a fundamental right that each person carries with them, regardless of their age, social status, education, or any other circumstance. And recognizing this dignity in others is perhaps one of the most powerful ways to manifest our own humanity. Not every hero wears a uniform or seeks recognition. Some wear white coats and stop to sit next to an elderly woman in a blue plastic chair. Some choose to see people where others see only numbers or problems. Some decide that it's worth spending a few extra minutes to restore someone's faith in human kindness. And perhaps that's exactly what the world needs. Not grand gestures or dramatic revolutions, but people willing to perform small acts of kindness that, when added together, can change the quality of the human experience for all of us. Because in the end, we are all Eleanor at some point in our lives, vulnerable, needing care, hoping to be seen and treated with the dignity our humanity deserves.